Hello, wrestling friends. I'm Matt Kuhn, and this is the Gentleman Villian podcast with the Lord himself, the man himself, the king, the head of the Blackpool Combat Club,
Oh,
Mr. Regal. How are you today?
that was a big introduction, wasn't it?
There's a lot of titles in wrestling, and you've had more than your
Yes.
share. How many
One or
names?
two.
How many names have you had in wrestling?
I have no idea because the first 2 years I was wrestling from 16 till I was 18, I had a different name all the time. Whatever whoever was billing me decided to use, or my friend Peter Thompson, that I've mentioned him before. If when we were doing a lot of these holiday camp shows in England, which we did lots of. You when you got there, there were just 2 matches, and then it was like paid entertainment for the people staying at these these vacation resorts. And you would get the piece of paper and write the matches, or somebody would, and then give it to the compere or the announcer who was, as we walked out, because it was just part of the day's entertainment or the night's entertainment. And so anything that they thought was funny, all kinds of silly names and ridiculous names that they gave me, or just plain names, or Soul Kid Dawson once.
That's cool. You like soul music. That works out.
Yes.
Yeah,
Ian Wilson, actually, the person instrumental in keeping me in this industry. Ian Wilson, who I was ready to quit right as I turned 17, so that wasn't cut out for this. And I had one match with him, and he gave me light at the end of the tunnel. So I owe him immensely, because without him, none of this would have happened, because I was ready to just quit. I had that enough. But he made me feel like there was a chance, and I stayed with it after that. He decided he was going to call me. He said, "I know a good name for you." He said, "There's lots of Pauls." He said, "You like soul music?" I said, "Yeah." Soul Kid Dawson. Been all kinds of things. Bertie Bassett from Littlehampton was a favourite of theirs. I don't know. I ain't got time to get into. Well, Bertie Bassett was a thing from a candy company in England, and Littlehampton. Hampton is another word for a men's genitalia in England.
Oh.
And there is a place called Littlehampton, so they thought it was very amusing to bill me from Littlehampton.
It's a
lot.
play on words. Yeah.
Yes.
It's a little bit like have you ever seen the movie Spinal Tap before?
Yes.
It's a little bit like when they start going over their first band names, like you're talking about all these things. You're like, first we were this, and then we were that, and then we were this, and then we were that.
And then finally, I saw I've told this story of American Wrestling Magazine, and right before I was about to debut in the big company that did TV in England when I was 18, and a friend of mine, Tony Francis, saw a picture of Mr. Electricity, Steve Regal. He went, "That's a good name," because who'd have thought I'd never mind get anywhere, but needed a name. And so I took his name, and it stayed with me, and then obviously got changed to William later on. So there we go.
Well, in the career of William Regal, one of the things that everybody remembers, like, just really well, it's just the most unusual, inexplicable, unlikely, but yet memorable and fun pairing is you with Yoshihiro Tajiri.
Yes.
And that's what we're here
to
talk about today.
Everybody remembers, but that's 20 years ago now.
It's crazy, right? It's
most people don't remember it. We think they do, because you were watching it, and it's part of my life, and it's gone like that. But why would you, if you're a 25-year-old wrestling fan? How would you know about me and Tajiri?
That's very true. But one of our most requested topics is your time with Tajiri.
Oh, dear.
Because the people who were watching it definitely remember it. And for us who were wrestling fans at the time, Tajiri as a comedy character is not something we expected. No. How familiar were you with the Buzzsaw Tajiri, his ECW work, his Japan work, before he came to WWE?
I'd seen him a lot in ECW. I used to see that show and thought he was really special. I'd seen him do little like character. He's a unique character. So I'd seen bits of him doing little things, and I thought but that was as much as I knew about him. And how we got together was, as far as I know, it was a Paul Heyman idea. I was doing the commissioner, and the next thing I get, he came up, was coming. I heard he was coming. I thought, oh, just another person. Okay, good. I get pulled in. We were in where's Disneyland?
In Anaheim.
Anaheim.
Mhm.
We were in Anaheim, and I believe it was Anaheim, and I just get told, "Oh, we're going to put Tajiri with this fellow called Tajiri's. We got to put him with you." And straight away, I said, "Oh, hang on a minute." And it's one of the few times I've ever done that. And I went, because all I could imagine straight away, because of my comedy brain or entertainment brain, was Inspector Clouseau and Kato. And I thought, it's just going to be, anything we do is going to be too much. This is all happening in split seconds in my brain, but this is what was going on in just a few moments in my brain. Oh, that's going to be too similar to that. Not sure. I don't quite get why I need to be with anybody, for one. What's the point? And not getting it. And I went and asked, which I always used to, if I didn't didn't think I could make it work. We talked about that on this. Always make it work. Whatever you get given, just try it. Because if you don't give it all you've got, it's probably not going to work. You never know what can work. So always give it a chance. I went to Mr. McMahon's office and just walked in. I said, "Boss, I'm not sure about this. I'm just seeing Inspector Clouseau and I don't know." And he went, "Just give it a go." That was it. It was all his lines to me, "Just give it a go." So I thought, okay. And that was all it took, was for him to say that again. All these things that I tell people, I need it myself occasionally. Give it a go. And by the time I'd walk from the set where we had this office, supposedly my office was set up backstage at Anaheim, from me walking off the set to go to Mr. McMahon's office and coming back, I thought, let's give it a go. So we sat down and we had this this vignette to do, and I thought, well, this is in the afternoon, so it's not live or anything. So I just thought, I don't know what to do. So instead of me taking the role here, I'll just try it and I'll react off him, because I've learned to do that a lot, which is just react off people. I react off people, and if you can get to that point where you learn to react, that's great. We all start off playing at things and that, but when you learn to react, it's a completely different ball game. There's plenty of explanation of that in other episodes, so we won't get into bore people with that today. And so I just let him do his thing. And whatever it was that the ideas, because I was very fortunate. I had a lot of trust with WWE. Whatever it was, we had to, let's basically say, whatever we had to sell at that point, which was whatever point we had to get across in this vignette. There was just like bullet points of what they needed, and I was like, okay, let's just roll we want and see where it goes. And I thought, I'll just react to him. And they told me he's going to be working for you now, and like as your
assistant.
Assistant. So we just went, roll camera, and I said, "Oh, can you get me some tea?" And he just turned and got this and just did this ridiculous thing. He just went tuk 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 tuk, and I just burst out laughing. And the instant second I did it, I wasn't happy with myself. It's like a split second of, I don't usually, I like to, I was mostly a one take person, but then a split second later, this is going to work just fine. And from then onwards, I just, anything we did, I just reacted off him. I let him do him. We never ever once sat and thought about, and not one thing did we ever discuss about us being an act together. I just let him be him, and I was me, and it was that simple and that easy. And for the people who do remember it, and they seem to, the older people that watch that, they remember me and him being together, and we just had fantastic chemistry, and that was it. And it was, every single thing was just me reacting off whatever he did, and I just react to it. And it was that simple. It was one of the easiest things I've ever had to do, as far as not put any thought to it whatsoever. It's a bit like what I'm doing at the moment. I don't put it, like, whatever these things are that we do, I just, because I'm at a place now where there's all these years of whatever it is, I am William Regal, and there's every little influence of everything. Whatever it is, it just turns on, and I just go out there and do it. And I'd say whatever I say, and some of these silly things I say are outrageous, or I can turn it like that, where I can give credibility to things. And this is what I'm doing at the moment with the BCC is the same. That's, well, it has been up to now, where I haven't put any thought into it. And I don't mean not caring. It's like, it just becomes second nature to me. Well, that was what it was like from instant, the time with Tajiri, after that first, me breaking the take, everything was like that. It was just never sat and thought about it on car rides. It's just, it works, and let's not even think about it, because sometimes you can, if you overthink, you can ruin things. And I just didn't, and I just carried on with it, and just let him do his thing, and I did mine, and it worked every time.
Your reactions are amazing, and your reaction in real life kind of mirrored us as fans when we first saw Tajiri come in, because if you out there have not seen Tajiri in Super Crazy matches, or Tajiri with Super Crazy and Lil Guido, any of those matches,
yeah, fantastic.
It is not the Tajiri you know. It is this amazing wrestler.
He was just incredible.
Very kind of like Muta inspired, kind of very, very, very good wrestler who you only saw in a serious mode. And
great trainer as well, like really excellent trainer, tough trainer. Like he's but he knows what he's doing when he's trained. A lot of people have, they've picked up a lot from him if they've. One of the things with him, I think, if you're lucky enough to be around him, pick his, like, get in the ring with him, and he understands a lot about this, and how to be a character, but he's trained really hard. I mean, some of the he's gone through it, wherever he's gone, in Japan, in Mexico, he knows what he's doing, and he's very, very good.
With the first skit that you did, and I just saw it recently, you can look it up. You are just in full Commissioner Regal mode. You are reacting, overreacting to everything, and you can see, you can see you smiling a couple times. And I guess, you said give it a go. You must have had a lot of confidence. I don't know. Maybe you had a lot of confidence after this first segment. You're like, okay, this is going to happen. This is going to work. Yeah.
Let's just go. No more thought put to it whatsoever. And that was how it went from then onwards. It was no more thought. We just, okay, you do this? Yeah. And we did it. And that was how it went. Not the slightest. And so this is going to be a short episode because the stuff really is just there to watch. And it's a body of work that is something that one day I'll go back and watch all of it and go, oh yeah, that was entertaining. And that's what it was. And we became this thing that just worked, and it was wonderful. And then there was, please lead the you lead
Yeah,
the way
for
today.
sure. Well, you had those. You had like 3 weeks of these skits where you're just, you've got this kind of look like you don't really know what's going on. You don't know how to
No,
react. You're just going with the flow. And then, you know, was there any kind of plan that you know of, or you're just taking it week by week?
I always wanted to be the last person that needed to be any bother to anybody.
Right.
Again, coming from the people that I was taught by, just be a good pro, do your job. Different when you come to America and or now anywhere, I suppose you've got to find your way. I was just somebody who was quite happy doing whatever. What you need me to do? Okay, right, and do that. So there'll be other people who are on the writing team. There'll be people that know more, that will have far more about this than me. All I used to know was I turn up, and me and him just did our thing.
Mr. Regal, man, summertime was great. We had a good time. You just got back from a trip to England, and that tells us that the nights are getting longer. But the breeze isn't the only thing that's getting stiff. My God. That's right. This episode is sponsored by BLUECHEW. Who else would say that? Guys, we all know that confidence can take you far in life. I'd say there's almost nothing more crucial than confidence, and it's especially true in the bedroom, especially when it's time to step up to the plate. That's where BLUECHEW comes in. Now, BLUECHEW, if you've listened to podcasts, you know this. But if you haven't heard and you haven't tried, you should try, because it's a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, but in chewable tablets and at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. The process is simple. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. The best part, it's all done online. So no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. BlueChew's tablets are made in the USA and prepared and shipped direct to your door in a discreet package. Now, if you've been listening to these podcasts for a while, whether it be this one or other ones on the Conrad's network, the ad-free shows, you know that everybody is so excited about BlueChew, and I have yet to hear a complaint. I've heard a lot of comments and no complaints. And, nobody's going to complain when you make a first impression like that, because first impressions are important, but also lasting impressions, if you get what I'm saying. So if you, and who couldn't, benefit from extra confidence when it's time to perform, chew it and do it. Well done. Let's say that again. Chew it and do it. Have better sex. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Guys, if you put it off, try it now. What do you got to lose? Make everyone around you happy, including yourself. You try BlueChew free when you use our promo code GENTLEMAN at checkout. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com, promo code GENTLEMAN, to receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank BlueChew for sponsoring the podcast.
I never asked anybody what we're doing this week, because I was in a role, and there'd be people like Brian Gewirtz, and there'd be people like Ed Koski, and numerous other people. And I apologize if I'm not, because there was a revolving cast of characters involved in this that put us together. And Bruce, if I remember rightly, Bruce was there. Paul Heyman was, they all had their ideas and put them there, and just, what do you need? Okay, and that was it. We just say 3:00, be in that room,
Right.
or this is live and you've got to get this across. And we just did it, and it was that simple. And hopefully it wasn't too hard for them to put together, because writers and creative people have an incredibly hard job, and wrestlers need to understand that, that it's, it's really hard putting a show together, and just sometimes you've got to be a squeaky wheel and whatever else, but I wasn't. And it just no problem with what you need. Yeah, and I had that built in. It was a incredible opportunity and character that I was given, the commissioner, where I got to just do all these wonderful things, and he just added to it and just made it better, and we just played off each other, and it was like we were a proper double act without having. And I've studied and read a lot about actual comedy double acts where they have to do a lot of hard work and rehearsals and sometimes falling outs and sometimes all kinds going on in their lives. And it goes for Laurel and Hardy and Abbott and Costello
Right.
and in Britain, Morecambe and Wise and it's just, there was nothing like that at all.
And
I will joke about the fact that I don't like him. We traveled together and he used to drive me up the wall traveling with him, but we always got on, and it was just that, it was that simple. I mean, it was just, what you need, yeah, and be whatever time, yes, we'll be there, and right, and what you need, boom, and it was done. And it was that simple. The only thing that sometimes created wasn't a problem, I can't remember it ever being a problem, is if another person was put in there. And sometimes if I'd watch it back, or maybe we need to do this again, or somebody else would say that because they hadn't quite pulled off their bit, or something hadn't quite meshed between us. And that's not putting it on them. It was the meshing of either one of us with them, and not me and him. Me and him just were like as if we were we knew each other inside and out, which we didn't really. But it was, I've never had it that easy with anybody else where I could just go out and do stuff that. Well, actually, I have. No, I'm saying that I have. I've had nothing but people like that. Yeah, no, because I had the exact same thing with Bobby Eaton. There was never, everything was just boom with Bobby Eaton.
but there's a lot.
Dave Taylor's been the same. Robbie Brookside the same. So yeah, I've been very fortunate when I look at partners that I've had in different forms. I've never had any trouble with any of them. And there's not much. So when I just said that was the easiest thing, no, they've all been easy for me. When I look back at it, how fortunate have I been to have that? But the Tajiri thing, it was, and Eugene was the same. It was just no problem, bang, and done. And that was that.
With these segments backstage, normally pre-tapes, and you said normally maybe produced by either Bruce or Paul Heyman,
Yeah.
written by Brian or Ed Koski.
And I could have that wrong. They made
right. There's a lot of people back
there. A lot
there.
of people.
Right. But what? So, for instance, on this
Paul
first
was
one,
a huge fan. Sorry, Paul was a huge fan of Tajiri.
Oh
So
yeah.
I know he was trying to put him into something, and so that's probably Paul's story to tell, how he ended up getting him even put into this role. But I don't know. I've never asked. So I didn't. If I might have asked if we hadn't got on from the first take. Why have you put me? It might
Right,
have
right.
become more of a thing.
Right. No need
I
to
didn't
ask if
need
it
to.
works.
No,
Yeah.
exactly. I didn't. Never asked. I know that Paul was there. I know there was a time when we split up, and I wasn't so sure about it was time to split up, and it was over Tory Wilson. But Paul, it was definitely Paul's idea, and he because he'd seen Snatch, and Alan Ford had played Bricktop in there, and the line of, do you know, and if you've ever seen it, but do you know what Nemesis means? And Paul had seen the movie and he loved the character, and I love the character. Fantastic performance by Alan Ford. And he wanted us to do something similar, which we did at one point. But then we ended up getting back together again later on. And you'll have to tell me the times and whatever else.
Well, I was curious about, just for instance, this first segment, this first thing you guys meet. There's the tea thing. You're reacting. You're like, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" And okay, this is what's going on. How much writing and directing took place? Like, did they block it for you and say, okay, Tajiri's going to walk here and then walk there? Or they said, here's the point you're trying to get across, go.
Here's the point it's trying to get across and go.
Wow.
As far as I know. Now, don't forget, that's my part of it. There's
Right.
all the crew and the camera crew and the sound crew that have got to do all the work before I get there. So it's not easy for them. They're the ones who've got to set everything up, and the people who've written the segment, and again, I had such trust with them that but they've still got to write it because you're writing the format of a TV show. So they've had to sit down and think of these segments and put them on paper for me to just come in and just go, okay.
And do you
bang.
Do you get direction on like
Sometimes, yeah, you get
how to
direction.
like
Yeah.
like meaning do you get direction on how to what your attitude should be? Like they say you're
Yes.
surprised or you're shocked or you're
Yep.
angry or
Yep.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, you get direction just like you would in any other, and that's very few people can all the time self-direct. So,
Oh,
it's
for
it,
sure.
it,
For
it,
sure.
it's like, yeah, but usually it was just whatever had gone into that. We used to turn up, and then we would get told we want this, and we'd do it, and without me and him doing it. Not that I can ever remember me and him having to have any kind of, well, you do this, I do none of that. Just this is it. Make sure he understood what we were doing. Right.
It's amazing stuff.
You just start rolling the cameras and let's go. And
And there's
sometimes we do a couple, if we do a couple to get them right, or and some there's a lot of things. Sometimes you can go. There's sound issues. There's always sound issues when you're doing that. Somebody talks in the background, or somebody's phone goes off, or so sometimes that kind of stuff went on. That's always going to go. That goes on. You've got, it goes on to this day. Doesn't matter where you are. It's always going to go on. The sound issues, or there's a lighting issue, or there's something. But as far as I just turned up with Tajiri, he might have a different story. He might have planned every little movement that he did and thought about it. I've never asked him. I'd rather not know, because then it'd ruin the magic for me. I like to think of it as we just turned up. Everybody else had put in all the hard work to set it up, to write it, set it up, direct it, have to be there, give us their precious time to allow us to do this, which is another thing. People giving you their time, and whether it's their job or not, they're still giving you their precious time, and time is precious. They give you their time to help you make this look as good as possible and give you the best stuff for you to work with. And you come in and I just go, thank, boom, 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 thank everybody and leave. And that's how I remember every single thing that we did.
Well, that's your job, and you talk about doing the job with Tajiri in these segments. It's all comedy. It's fun stuff. It's ridiculous. There's 3 weeks of it. And then at some point, Tajiri gets his first match. And it's interesting because a lot of us, a smaller audience had seen Tajiri wrestle, but the larger WWE audience did not know what they're in for. And your reactions in the match really mirrored what a lot of people were. You were gobsmacked. The character of William Regal was gobsmacked at what, oh my goodness, this funny guy is a wrestling machine. My goodness. Those kind of reactions are kind of pivotal for the William Regal character, I think.
That's just fortunately what I've picked up over the years, is learn to react. I don't know how many times I've said this while we've been doing this podcast, but when you can learn to react and not act, you're going to find this a lot easier. And it takes, some people can do it instantly. It took me a lot of life to get to that point. But when you can just react off things instead of acting, this becomes a lot easier. And you put out a better version of you and a better version of whatever you're trying to sell to people as far as a product. And my product is William Regal. So the and the that's it. Is just learning how to react to anything. It's and everybody's got their own way. I think mine was just time, mistakes, failures, doing okay, ups and downs. And I got to a point where I could, by the time I got to America, once I started doing that kind of stuff, which was from the Lord Stephen character onwards, which was a lot of reaction to other people's way of doing things. If you ever see any of the old stuff from in the early 90s, well, 94 onwards, of me and Sting, myself and Sting, he might have a completely different notion of this, but I remember just me and him having great chemistry and just reacting to each other. And I would do my character and he would do Sting, and it would just react. And I could pull my faces and react to anything he did, and it goes on, and hopefully you know, I hope you all get that opportunity to do that with and Tajiri was very good at that. He was very good at just reacting, and he could do all this. We both sort of built our reputations on wrestling, our own particular styles or variation. The thing with both of us, we both have a variation of styles. I know people associate me with a British style or a European style. That is the base of it. But there was bits picked up from my travels, and little bits of all kinds of stuff gone into my style. And it's the same with him. Been all over the place, and he had his own. He could do all kinds of different styles. When you can do all kinds of different styles, you get more comfortable with yourself if you know you can do them. And he had to do what I had to do. He had to leave Japan and go to Mexico and figure out how to make it there, and come to America and figure out how to make it in America. And if you leave your homeland, and you've just got to, everywhere you go, you've got to be able to adapt. The key to all of this is being able to adapt. And that can come with a million different experiences, how you can react, how you can adapt. So with being able to adapt to anything becomes your ability, is heightened of, in the way that you can react to
It
things.
enhances that ability.
Enhances is the
Your
word I was looking
adaptation
for.
enhances your reaction.
Yes, and my brain's not firing on all cylinders as usual when it comes to finding words. I know that's a thing.
I'm the same way, man.
But it enhances your ability. If you can adapt to every country you go to, or whatever style you need to do, when it comes to doing the reactions to things, it just becomes part of it, because you've either lived it, and so you can play angry, happy, mad, glad, sad, whatever you need, and because you've lived it. And some people have to act that their whole lives, some people, and I don't know what his things were, but I know what mine were, and I've lived through a real big range of everything in my life, and so that's why I could just react. And all I did when I was younger was watch wrestling and then study British comedy. And when I say study, at first it was just watching it, and then start studying it, and then so it just became part of. I could just, so many different things that we've talked about in this show. Influences, there's as much comes from British entertainers. Sometimes, well,
Even more. Yeah.
Laurel and Hardy did, but one of them was British. But just there's so many things that were just where other people might have spent their whole life watching sports. I was watching entertainment, and so all these things are just in my head, and so it's this, or it's that, or it's whatever's needed, is what probably got me through the entertaining part of my career.
There's so many great lessons. I want to, off topic real quick, you talked about Sting, and also, Tajiri's got that back handspring elbow. What was it like recently Muta
Mm,
came to AEW. Did you cross paths with him? Did you get to say hi to
I
him?
did. Yes, I went and said
What
hello to him.
what was
Yes.
it like for first of all to see him in the AEW ring, getting the response he got, and also running across him for the first time in a while?
That was nice to see him. I haven't seen him since, I believe it was 2002. WWE were in Japan first time in a long time, and I opened the show with Edge, and he was at ringside. I don't know if he was doing some kind of commentary or something. I don't know, but as I left the ring at the end of the match, I walked over to him because we used to wrestle each other in Japan, and he stood up and we shook hands, but we never got to actually meet. It was just in front of the crowd, and then I left. So I went and had a chat with him for a while, and that's between me and him, just a nice little chat, reminiscing about a few things, and then saw him go out there and get great reaction, and never saw him afterwards. But I'm happy for him. I'm a bit weird. Feels weird. There's going to be no Great Muta.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, because
Did it
it's
make you did it make you want to pull out the Regal moonsault?
no,
Seeing him again?
definitely not. Never again,
Never again.
and
And
never. No,
you talked about the different styles. We talked about last week or a couple weeks ago. We talked about. I asked about language barriers, and it seemed to me that what the perceived language barrier with you and Tajiri really fed into that physical comedy. It was more helpful than a hindrance. It actually created more comedy, and you guys did that without being so reverential to Mr. Clouseau, or even relying on old inappropriate racial tropes or that kind of thing. You
no.
guys really were able to hit it with the cultural barriers. Really enhance that whole situation with
fact,
you, Tajiri.
Maybe I'm overthinking this, but there was a certain vignette we did, and I wanted. It's just me because we didn't play on that. There was some vignette I did with Mr. McMahon, and I believe it was to, and it might not have been to Jerry, but it was sort of a see where some people will take this one way, but there's like a little underlying thing from me about stereotypes of any kind of how ridiculous it is, where I think it was Tajiri and somebody else who wasn't American was talking, and they left, and I looked at Mr. McMahon, and I went, bloody foreigners. And then he just looks at me, because I'm one.
Right.
And it was like my little thing to, you don't need that. I've made a career out of playing on a stereotype of being an Englishman.
Right.
Right. And now it's just, it is, and I still do it to a point. Like it's the old things that I used to do now. Just sometimes I go out, I've said, I go out and I'm just an eccentric Englishman. I can get away with all kinds of stuff. But we didn't do that. And there was, when we were actually as a tag team, and we were in, I had trunks made with a British and a Japanese flag on that I wore when I know, sure, I had them on the night we won the tag team championships in Japan. But that was a little thing to me, if it could have been a United Nations thing, I would have had that on my trunks just to go, we're all the same. Because if you go back to my, grandfather's age group, they never met a Japanese person, but they'd been in wars with Japanese people, and and it was there's whatever that they lived. It wasn't what I don't live in that world. There's that national. My pronoun. It's not us. We haven't been fighting any wars. It's a different.
Right.
Whatever their thoughts of another country is not what I think. And so I wanted to go out there with like how we're all the same. We all breathe. We all eat, and we all die. if you haven't figured that out, the world would be a lot easier place if people just figured that out.
But it's so clever, nuanced, because
Yeah.
it's not a racial trope. You guys do the thing like the difference between the kinds of tea that you
Yes.
guys like. Like that's a great example of how you guys threaded that line and how it worked. Like there's a cultural difference, and there's you being inexplicably confused by everything. But at the same time, that is a very clever thing to do, to say, okay, well, it's different kinds of tea. Let's go with that.
Yeah. And just, again, it was just stuff that we did, and we never, there's no thought of it. It was just playing on reality and trying to make it entertaining.
Now I'm not going to make you try to remember your first tag team match with Tajiri, because it was against an unusual tag team, Madison Square Garden,
Wow.
Mr. Regal and Tajiri against Scotty 2 Hotty and Chris Jericho.
Well,
Yeah, we've talked about this before, and I think I have an understanding now that if you can wrestle, you can wrestle.
yes.
So it's not that much difference. But how much fun was it to wrestle as a tag team with Tajiri?
All I remember it was just being really, really fun. I don't remember that particular match, but I know both opponents were great opponents for me. Chris and Scotty, I always had were good matches with, so it was, and I don't remember anything ever being out of order with any of the matches that me and Tajiri had. So they're just another day at work. You know, we had chemistry together as a backstage item, and as soon as we were put together as a tag team, it worked just the same. No problems whatsoever. No real thought to anything. He understand that it's that universal language of wrestling we've talked about in the past, where we just go with the flow, and everybody there could just do their thing, and we just go out there and do it.
Because much like music, wrestling becomes the language. Wrestling
Yes.
becomes the way to communicate with each other. And like you said, it was short lived. And one of the reasons is because you kind of your character went on a little sidetrack with with the alliance, with the whole.
Yes.
You become commissioner. Of the alliance. You what they say, turned bad guy. And you guys wrestle each other at the Rebellion pay-per-view in Manchester, and a Survivor Series in Greensboro. Did you prefer wrestling with him or as a tag team, or I'm guessing you had no preference?
No preference at all. No, I remember him. It was good for what I think we didn't have a lot of time to do anything.
What about in general? Do you prefer single matches or tag matches in your career?
Really didn't matter to me. If it's, I've been equally comfortable with both, and I've had such an incredible array of tag partners, and I've never not got on with any of them. And then singles wrestling, I've made whatever work, and I've had great chemistry with, and people who, even if I hadn't somehow managed to get around it, from whatever skills I'd picked up or that they'd picked up. So it was just doing the job and getting it done. And that was all this is really. I get these, everybody has a different idea of what they want out of this. I wanted to be a career pro, and I was, and some, because I went to heights and places that and not, I wouldn't say heights because I never really looked at. I mean, just getting to a different country was, I consider, a height, and I had nothing but that, and a lot more than I ever expected to have. And then I had an incredible. If you go back and for one person, like, again, I don't think I'm anything, but if you go back and look at the list, and this is just what's on what you can find. I mean, it's funny when somebody said something to me the other week. I had something ridiculous about, have you seen a list of your top 10 matches? I said, how can anybody put a list of my top 10 matches except, and I said, I can't. I said, because there's been about, I don't know, a 50th of my career has been on film, right? There's a tiny portion of my career has been filmed.
But yet, in the minds of fans,
In the
that's how
minds
they
of
think of
fans,
you.
that's how they
Right.
think of you. So they
Right.
know you for whatever you've done. So it is what it is. And you know, there's matches that I remember. There's things that it's because it becomes so normal just to go out there and do your thing and what you want out of this. I've had an incredible run of wonderful experiences, life, a career in wrestling. And if you look back at the actual amount of people and made a chart of the people that I've actually stood across the ring against, you'd probably be lucky. You won't find too many people that have done that.
Well, that's
Because
for
of
sure.
and it's only because of the time that I was born.
But also your attitude, though, too. Like you've always, you know, everything you say is about really how to get along. It's like a template how to get along at work, how to get along at
Yeah,
work, how to do your job.
yeah.
You know, you talk about. I say, hey, what do you think about the future? And you're like, I don't think about the future. I'm doing my job.
Doing my
And that
job. Yeah.
attitude has a lot to do, I think, with your longevity and your success. And I think you think so too, because that's the one thing you like to pass on more than anything is having a positive attitude in the workplace.
Yes, if you can, because if you don't, it's hard work. And again,
That's
if this
any
is hard
job.
work,
Yeah.
if this is hard work for you, then it's time to, maybe you shouldn't be doing it. You know, like if it's always going to be hard work. When I say hard work, I'm talking. Sorry, if this is miserable for you and you are not happy in this job, if you there's loads of times when you get like that, but if you can sit down and just take stock of what it is you're doing. Am I doing the job I want to do? Yes. Am I getting paid? Yes. Is it what I want to do at the moment? No. But what's the alternative? Oh, in my case, straight away, and I'm very proud of all my family and my father and my grandfather and we're all master bricklayers and stonemasons. But I never wanted to lay a brick in my life because that's what I was down for. And anytime I just go, not stood in the rain laying bricks. And I can be miserable, and I think few people might have had me talk to them and go off and get it off my chest. But within, I would say, less than half an hour at the most, I'm probably starting that thing. If nothing else, there's something kicking into my head that's saying, you chose this life. You know what the pitfalls are. You know what it was about. Get a grip. Right. Yeah. It's all been good.
Absolutely. You know, I have those moments too. And I just think to myself, I taught a kid how to play Led Zeppelin today. My life is not too
Right.
bad, you know?
Right. Right.
And with you
Oh,
and
can I
this,
just give you a
sure,
little? Oh, this would be
sure,
interesting for
sure.
you. So my wife went to the same middle school. She moved to Blackpool when she was 13, but she used to go to the same middle school in Kidderminster, which is in the Midlands of England, that John Bonham and Robert Plant went to.
Wow. That is insane.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I spend my days teaching John Bonham drum licks. Like, you know,
Right.
I mean, that's amazing. That is, and you know, they were only, not to
Wait a
sidetrack too
little. I'm just giving these things because
but you're
why am
talking
I
middle
going to tell them?
school. In
This is
middle
middle
school,
school.
it was literally only 7 years later where they started Zeppelin. Like that's
Right.
insane. You
Okay.
know? Yeah.
So what just as a drumming thing, right? It's little things that, and who else is going to tell you this? Very famous British wrestler, called Kendo Nagasaki, not the Japanese gentleman that was in America as Kendo Nagasaki. This is British Kendo Nagasaki, who played a Japanese character and was very successful at it. He had an original manager, George Gillette. George unfortunately passed away. Then he had his second manager was a man called Lloyd Ryan. I know Lloyd, who's gone on with him. He was a drum teacher. He taught Phil Collins how to drum.
Wow.
So there's another little useless
Wow.
bit of information for you. You never know what you're going to learn on this show.
Who actually played with Led Zeppelin at the Live Aid concert in 1984. And
Right.
also, and I hope he's doing okay. I saw a video of Phil Collins recently, and he looks like he's struggling health-wise these days. But man, what a pivotal figure in British and American music history for sure.
This isn't the time then because he's not doing well, but I have a great Phil Collins story.
Well, we will do it, and hopefully he comes back.
Yes,
And
I hope it kicks
strong.
out, because if not, I don't want to say that because it is a sticking point with me, and I have the photos to prove it. Yes.
He also did a couple tours with Clapton on drums, even, of course, the Genesis stuff, and an amazing musician. This is going to be a shorter episode of Gentleman Villian, but I want to talk about a couple other things with Tajiri. You talked about the breakup, and you talked about the kind of influence it had, Tori Wilson being kind of a geisha, and
Tori was what a lovely lady she was. Absolutely lovely.
One of the greatest of all time, really, at what she did.
Yeah.
But you mentioned earlier you thought maybe they cut it off a little too short. Maybe it could have gone a little longer.
Well, I did at the time, but then it played back in perfectly. I've been very fortunate. Mr. McMahon was right on the button, and there's a lot of times, and Paul Heyman was right on the button. Always leave something before it overstays its welcome. And they knew better than I did at the time to get out of something. Because if you leave it on a high, you can always go back to it. And it will be special again. You can always go back to it, but if you've let it peter out, it might not have the same effect. And they were smart enough to pull me out of, like, the first time I was the commissioner, they pulled me out of that to do a program with Edge. When I first heard it, I'm like, oh, well, that's a bit odd. But then as soon as it was explained to me within a split second, yep, I get it. And then look how many times I got to revisit some form of that character. Paul pulled me out of the thing with Tajiri, which was going great. But then we got to go back and do more with it and do something different with it. And actually, that, not that means anything to me, but it would be a big thing for Tajiri to win and when it was a big honor that I was trusted with that, but I was happier for him that we got to win the WWE Tag Team Championships in Japan. That was an unbelievable night, an incredible night.
It's interesting, the idea. I don't think there's a more universal show business concept that's true than leave them wanting more. You know what you're saying.
Elvis never did any encores, right?
Right. Don't do encores if you don't have
left
it
the
prepared.
building.
Right. Leave people wanting more. And what you're saying is that creates an opportunity perhaps to go back and revisit it.
Yep.
And they have the opportunity. You got a Japanese tour, you're in Japan, and you have an opportunity to reunite. Of course, in the meantime, Tajiri did some stuff with Eddie Guerrero replacing Chavo, and were the tag champions.
They were
that was good stuff,
together.
man. That was good
Great
stuff, right? Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. I can't talk enough highly about Eddie, how great he was once he figured out that entertaining part of it, which he'd always had a bit, but once he really, there was nobody ever better than Eddie all around everything. And there's people have different ideas of that. I'm looking at it from a world travel pro who can go to any country and not talk to anybody and be able to wrestle anybody in any style, and then come to America and See, that's a different thing of completely. Nowadays, you know, without being able to go and even see your opponents sometimes, and just to go out and not talk about stuff, and excuse me, and not talk about stuff, and just be able to do your job. And Eddie was that, and that ability, and then to pick up the entertaining thing, and then just different league, and of that's a different kind of pro altogether, which most people will never understand. Will never understand that because they've never had to be that, and be able to do the kind of things that he was able to do.
What do you
And
mean
then
never?
take,
Like, what do you mean never had to be that?
because it just doesn't exist anymore, where you've just got to go, you can, to be able to wrestle any style, and
Got it.
not have to talk to anybody, and make it and go, and which, you know, that's Eddie's story, but just to be able to wrestle so many different ways, and any, he could, you know, far better than me, could wrestle any opponent, make it great. And then he figured out the entertaining side of it in WWE. I mean, he'd already got that in WCW. He got really entertaining, but then he took it to a completely different heights. And it's, you know, if you've only worked America, or you've only worked in a certain, when you, these are years ago, and these things that I talk about, it wasn't the same. You had to, there was no getting looked after when you was out, you know, apart from if you worked for an American company. You know, Eddie had to go through it, and keep his family pride, and that in Mexico, and go to Japan, and make and get put into a position as being Black Tiger, and which is a big shoes to follow, you know, the second Black Tiger, and make that work, and then become such a big star in Mexico, and then come to America and capture people's attention, with the matches in ECW, and then come to WCW, and do the incredible things in there, and then come to the WWE and do the incredible things that he did there, and have that be that good, and have that level of entertainment ability. You know, there's people like Kurt Angle could have done that, but he was a WWE pro. You know, he, from the starting, he came
He
from
didn't have the benefit of the world tours.
He didn't have the benefit,
Right.
so he could. Then there's loads of people could have done it, but they didn't have to. There's loads of people I've met in America could have done that. They just didn't have to. Although Eddie was from America, you know, he was from a time when he couldn't get any work in America. He had to go out of America to get work, same as Dean Malenko. They had to leave America to make a name for themselves, because they weren't 6 foot and they weren't a certain size. They had to go out and make a name for themselves elsewhere. That's a different kind of thing. Unless you've actually done that, that's why I'm very, you know, that whatever anybody knows about me, or thinks they know about me, I've got a very big piece of my heart to help any of the foreign talent that come into America, because I know what it's like to come here, or to try and make it, just get on the card, or get hired, or and I'll go out my way to, as long as you're not rude or obnoxious or whatever, I'll go out my way to, what do you need? What can I do for you? Because, and then so I, big affinity for the Japanese that come over, and the Europeans, because I know how difficult it is. Well, Eddie was American, but he had to do the same thing. He had to go out and do that. Tajiri had to do that. He had to go out. What his story is incredible, that he had to go out and go around the world, and, you know, and just make it, just made it. And look at the size of, he's not a big fella, right? But he made it in the WWE in the early 2000s. Go look at that as well. When you hear these things, Sami Zayn's doing it now, you go, it's more accepted now. But they did it at a time when it wasn't.
And there's a lot to be said for those guys, especially the first impressions of Eddie Guerrero, to win over the audience of one, Mr. McMahon. Like, to win him over, and to sell him on, Eddie, you know, not the biggest guy in the world. Matter of fact, Bruce Pritchard said his first thing he said about Eddie was, he's so tiny, you know, like, and to win over Vince, with his ability. It says a lot about Eddie Guerrero and Tajiri and
Right.
anybody in that
Anybody.
era, you know.
Anybody who got a job and got hired, it doesn't matter whether anybody likes you. If the person hiring you, whether they like you or not, if you're getting paid, you're doing well. It's the way I look at it. If you got a job,
Right.
you're doing well.
Yes, sir.
You can't be worrying about whether, it's great if you get on with it. Like I've said this before, I never with Mr. McMahon, because he's my boss, and I knew that, and I knew one day he's gonna let me go, or he could let me go, and it happened, and I wasn't offended by it in the slightest, because it's business, and that's just the way it is. So if you're getting paid by a company, you should be thankful and work as hard as you can for that company, and do your best, and represent them, and do whatever. So we're getting off the topic here.
But
So
Right.
Tajiri and Eddie were great. They were, again, just magic together, and that was a skill both of them had. They could react, and they just meshed together, and that's their story. They may have sat and concocted anything. I have no idea, because I didn't ask them. I didn't want to. I just watched.
And both have the ability to be entertainers, but also so
Yeah.
explosive in the
Turn
ring.
it up and have credibility. That's another thing. It's having credibility in the ring. You can, and I'd like to think that I fall into that. You can be doing the silliest and most comedic of things 1 second, but bang, and when you go, people buy into what you're doing. That is another level of a completely different level of ability, and that usually only comes from life and struggles, I think.
That's a good point. And also ability, because, that Bob Holly match, his first match when you're reacting, Tajiri, I don't know, as a fan, has anybody ever had more effective or more credible looking kicks ever than Tajiri? And your reaction when you saw him kick Bob Holly in the head was our reaction.
Bob's such a pro as well. Bob's a really good pro, and Bob's a believable. He's believable, right? Because he is, and Bob's a really good. So that made it even better, because you've got a fella who's just no backing down, and you believe in him. You believe Bob Holly is beating the life out of people.
He's a badass, yeah, for
yes,
real. Yeah.
without question. And then to have Tajiri, that's what made that, is because they're both how good they were as professionals. But but if you can get Bob Holly to, that people actually think he's in jeopardy, there's a lot to be learned from that. We haven't got time to just break that down, but think about that. There's a guy that is a really tough guy that's known for being tough and being physical, and then a fella looks like Tajiri comes along, and by the end of it, what happened? I'll let you say.
Right. And it worked to
Right.
get Tajiri to be credible, but also
Right.
but Tajiri has to be credible enough for Bob Holly to want to give that to him too, right?
Right. So everything accomplished.
And
There's another thing. Go back, if you want to try and figure this job out. There's little things like that. How did that work? You bringing that up is a good learning lesson for people. How did that work? If you might not, again, if you're 25 or 20 now trying to come into wrestling, this is, I don't expect you to know anything about me, and I hope Bob, if Bob hears this, did not anything away. Bob, our time has changed. It's different. This is 20 years ago, but Bob had credibility, incredible credibility, and there was a physical guy, a physical wrestler. People knew that he wasn't a mess about kind of a person. At the end of that, Tajiri come out golden. How did that work?
And Bob was not the worse for wear.
No,
Right.
absolutely not. So
Right.
how did that work? Go and put your brains around that, and maybe you can take something out of it.
And so you've mentioned, and we talked about you and Tajiri in Japan, beating La Resistance,
Yes.
who got their moment of winning the tag team championships in their hometown, and then you got to give Tajiri this gift. You said that was really important to him. You felt honored to be a part of it.
I think it was. I would imagine it was. Yeah. I mean, I would imagine it's I don't know, and I really don't know. But I would imagine it's some kind of validation for him that he's had to leave his homeland and go around the world, and he comes back in the biggest company in the world on the biggest stage, doing and becoming the world tag team champion. I would think that would be a big deal for us.
A lot of time that's wrestling at its best. You know, we talked about
Mm.
Bailey last week, and seeing Bailey win at NXT San Jose in front of her crowd, great moment. Seeing Santino Marella winning his title against Umaga in front of his home crowd.
Incredible.
This La Resistance winning them. Sami Zayn coming out in Montreal recently. All these things, these hometown things, really is some of the most special moments in wrestling, I think.
Yep. So
So as tag team champions, you guys, you know, had some defenses against the Heartthrobs at MSG, Christian and Tyson Tomko in England, and Muhammad Hassan and Daviri in Birmingham, England. Any memories from defending, or is it just another 3 months on the job there?
another 3 months on the job, and all enjoyed all of it. Just got on with it and had a good time.
And
So that was it. Yeah, that was a good bit, you know, because that was after I came back. What year was this?
so the year that you were in tag teams, let's see,
Within
2005.
2005. So this is after
2005.
I'd come back after my heart
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So I you know, I thought I was told I was never going to work again. I was off work for a year, 2004, and so I came back, and you know, that was a good time, you know.
And that's you're in the every day's a gift kind of mode when you're wrestling.
Yeah,
You're glad to be back.
just glad to be back. Yeah, and just like, well, I never thought about that every day as a gift. It was just I wasn't gonna, and I've never been one of these. I'm not like a, you know, these people, this over positive. I just, you know what I mean. Like,
I was quoting The Sopranos, you know. Yeah.
it's just one of them things where like, no, it's not my time to end yet. And there's no big rah speeches going on in me or anything. Just no, I'm just, but I'm back, and I'm back with Tajiri, and we're doing that, and it was good, and because I didn't know if I was going to be able to come back, and so it would that was a good time.
That's an amazing thing. And Tajiri just decides to kind of leave, you know, leave to become a journalist, spend more time with his family.
Yeah.
But then you guys are reunited in ECW One Night Stand. You know, or Tajiri came back for One Night Stand, and he accompanied you in a match versus Ric Flair in Tokyo in 2008.
Which was Ric's final match in Japan. That was against me.
That's an amazing.
And we were stood in the ring, and I can tell this story. I thought that was it feels like a big deal to me. You know, because nobody's going to ever mention me in a breath with Ric Flair, are they? But we were stood in the ring, and it was Rick could have had anybody he wanted that night. It's Ric Flair. And it's his last match in Japan, because he knew where he was at the time, anyway, where he was going. And he stood across the ring from me and said, I couldn't, he said, I couldn't wish to be in here with anybody else. Yeah. It's nice, no?
You're getting a little emotional. That's really important to you. That's a really important thing. I don't mean to call you out on it.
He might not have meant it in the slightest. But you'd have to ask him. But for me,
it's a beautiful thing how important it is to you, though. It's beautiful,
because that was a nice thing for him to say, because we stood there. He said, I can't think of anybody better I'd like to be here than with you right now. I said, thanks. And then we had the match. And I remember that night for a couple of reasons. And I could have this definitely, but I think it's the right. I know definitely Nagata was there. Yuji Nagata came to see me, and I remember. Am I right in saying The Rock was on that bill? Rock had come back.
He more than likely was. I don't have that in front of me, but
well, because
that seems like
I know
the time frame, though.
I do know. Excuse me. I do know that there was one time where I was with, which can't be too many times that I was, and I think I know it was. So I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I am sure. Yuji Nagata was with me backstage, and Tiger Hattori, and The Rock was there, and The Rock came up to me and said, "Do you mind introducing me to your friends?" And like I didn't, because Rock's The Rock, and I don't want, and he actually came to me and said that he knew he knew Nagata was, and I introduced him, and he was very kind to Nagata. And it's little things like that you remember that really nice, because Rock is such a nice fella. But he came over, like, you don't need to do that, he's The Rock. But he came over and wanted to be properly introduced to him, so I introduced. Yeah.
But he was a guy who was respectful of the business, even though he's a
Absolutely,
huge star,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely. But
Yeah.
he doesn't have to be. If you have, there's a difference. He can, just because he doesn't have to be, he could have been doing anything else. There's times when I've seen him, rarely in whatever amount of years, but I remember once being backstage at a WrestleMania, and he was walking one of those huge stadiums, and I was just doing a backstage thing. So, but I was just off the side, and I know him from when I used to work with him, but I don't think I'm anybody. I was just keeping out the way, because he had a huge entourage of people with him. I don't know if it was working with him or just he was just coming along one of those arenas, and like, and I'm just, I got to keep out of the way. I don't want to go over and go, "Hello, Rock," like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just not the
Yeah,
way
I
I'm going to
do.
do. Right?
I
There's a
do.
lot,
Yeah.
and believe me, I've seen a lot of people do that
Yeah.
because they want, But I'm like, well, and he just stopped. I mean, like, and all these people went like all like dominoed up behind him like that, and he just went, hey, and he just come straight over to him. I was pretty much hiding out the way behind these like crates and that, because I just didn't want to get in his way,
Right.
And he come out and he was like, "Hey, Steve," he was just talking away, and then they all stopped, and they're all looking at me now, and I'm thinking, "Oh, this is," and then he went back, and then they all carried on walking up past
That
me.
that's amazing. Uh, as we're talking, as we're recording, you talk about you had Ric Flair's last match in Japan. As we're recording today, the day that we're recording is the 50th anniversary of Ric Flair's first match.
Wow,
How about that?
wow,
50 years. That's
wow,
crazy. That
wow,
is
yeah.
insane.
And
To
can I just say, like,
Sure.
there's people. When I look back now, there's people that not like, I've wrestled Ric Flair quite a bit. I wrestled him when I was 25. My first time was in Cardiff in England. Sorry, I apologise. I apologise to anybody who's Welsh. Cardiff in Wales. I was going to say Cardiff in Britain. Cardiff in Wales. And I wrestled him there, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, what am I doing across the ring from him? And then I wrestled him in that series of matches that I had. Whether you don't know it or not, but it's just a silly thing, Marcus of Queensbury, which isn't a thing at all. The actual British rules of wrestling was the Marcus, the Lord Mount Evans rules. Marcus of Queensbury's where's Dave Taylor's from. It was just me making stuff up, and
Right. But that's what we know is the
right,
the standard boxing rules,
the
right?
boxing
Yeah.
rules. Yes, well, it's the boxing rules, and it was
Right.
just me just being. I took the name of the boxing because it sounds
Just
better
making
than
stuff up.
Lord Mount Evans rules is the actual real rules of old British wrestling.
Right.
Which is another story. Mind me tell you that story one day, if I haven't already. And then, but like, I remember there was a new building opened in Tupelo, Mississippi, and off the strength of that show, those matches with Flair, with Rick, we were the main event of that show, and it was sold out. A brand new building at a time when WCW wasn't selling out. And I believe it was, and somebody I could have this wrong, but I was told anyway. I was told backstage. Again, I'm just telling you what, and it looked full to me. It was a new building. I remember it because me and Steve Austin were there that night. So this is weird story about keeping things in perspective. Let's try and leave things, tidy things up. So I'm on the main event with Ric Flair. Unfortunately, Rick had hurt his ankle. So as far as I know, it was a sold out building in a new arena in Tupelo. And so because Rick was a good guy at the time, he brought out Ricky Steamboat with him. And so I wrestled Ricky Steamboat in the main event instead of Ric Flair. But Rick was in his corner because Rick had a bad ankle injury. So, but before that, me and Steve Austin stopped to get something to eat. We got to Tupelo and we stopped in a Shoney's. And we sat there, and this is, both of us were never, when we traveled, we had a good time together, me and Steve. We were sat in this Shoney's, and it's full, it's 5 o'clock or whatever, it's full of wrestling fans, and we're just trying to keep our heads down. But there's obviously people recognized both of us, and they're chattering a little bit because they go into the show. This is not far away from the building. And we sat there, and this lady came over, this waitress, and she went, "You, Steven Regal?" And I went, "Yeah," because I'm just trying to keep my head down and be quiet.
Right, yeah.
"Yes. Lord Steven Regal?" And I went, "Yes." Now everybody in the place is looking at me and Steve Austin. She went, "I ain't never heard of you." And she went, "Steve Austin, you Steve Austin?" He went, yes, ma'am." "Stunning Steve Austin?" I was really loud, and he went, "Yes." And the whole place is silent. And she went, "I ain't never heard of you either." And she just walked off. So she just buried us both, and we're both like just purple, sat there like that. Go, "Oh God." Oh, she just just embarrassed us in front of everybody. And then we went over. But I remember wrestling Rick that night. So there's things when I say like I've never, but if you actually, again, it's that thing of putting the list together and people up. But if you go back, I've never been a main event guy. There's times when I have, or I've been in main events with Steve Austin, and house shows and this stuff. So when people start talking about that, it's like nonsense to me. I was never a main event guy, but there's plenty of times I've been in stuff and stuff like that. So it's just interesting. So that's about it, really.
Well, and as we finish this episode, and this is a great episode full of memories that those of us who are watching absolutely remember fondly. You guys had a kind of a unlikely reunion. And by the way, if you guys want to see something hilarious, go on YouTube and look up Tajiri and William Regal reunite, because Tajiri was in the Cruiserweight Classic, and you guys do a WWE.com exclusive segment where you're kind of flirting and talking to the secretary there and just being the Lord.
I just go straight back into character.
He walks in,
the lecherous Lord that I am. Yes,
you're doing a thing where you to his face, you're matching his energy of being so glad to see him, but to the camera, you're like, "Good Lord, what are we doing?" It's an amazing segment. What was it like to reunite with Tajiri, and how that come about?
It was great. It was great. I was happy that he got in it, and then there was a space for him in it, and then because that's another story. That was an incredible thing. I don't if people realize how such incredible stuff going on, because there was so much of it. The network at the time was all about selling network and the Cruiserweight Classic. But I was happy to because we had a great time. Like all the cruiserweights came to the PC from all these people from all over the world and different companies, and brought them all together, and we just having it was a fantastic time, that cruiserweight thing. And on to top it all off, I get to see Tajiri again. And so that was just a spur of the moment. Somebody said, "Do you want to film something with Tajiri?" And no thought whatsoever about it. Yep. Roll the camera, boom, me go back into my character, which is stereotypical English whatever villain in movies, a bit lecherous and a bit whatever it is, and all the silly stuff that I do,
full character.
Full character, and all the comment, and he just reacts to it, and there's all those,
and he is so glad to see you. It is amazing.
Have you seen there's another bit of that where because he's gone away since he went back to Japan. He's become like he does healing and stuff.
Yeah, I think he's got a book out too. I see him tweeting about a
Right.
book he has out.
So he's an acupuncturist, you know, and he actually he like I've got my eyes closed and he's stuck one in the end of my nose, stuck one in somewhere, and there's another one anyway that we filmed, and it was just let's just film it now. Like that. Do you want to do? Because whoever it was, Dustin, I believe, there's a guy called Dustin was really good and used to film stuff backstage. Do you want to do something with you? Yeah, you know, and yeah, what you want? Yep. And we just straight away just did something stupid. We just okay, you got the yeah, that's whatever thought it was. Maybe he just told me, and we did that. And there's a couple of things that was just nice to see him, and yeah, that was it. Me and Tajiri, yeah, it was
Fun stuff.
It was fun. Yeah,
fun stuff. So, you know, to close out, just your career has had this, you know, an arc of what you say it is. You know, this guy has a job and isn't maybe the main event guy or whatever you think it is. But a lot of these moments we remember are these little 3-month segments, 6-month segments, like the Man's Man, very short time. The first feud with Finley, very short time.
Yeah.
Tajiri, very short time. How do you, in your mind, when you look back at the Tajiri experience, how do you remember it? What is the, you know, primary feeling you have when you look back on the time you had with Yoshihiro Tajiri in WWE?
A lot of fun and a lot of good stories and a lot of just another part of a charmed life and a body of work that I've got, and I'm happy that he came into my life. Yeah.
Well, we're happy you came in our lives, Mr. Regal. We're happy for this podcast. We're happy for all the people that help work on the show.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Wesley or Dominic or Derek or, of course, Steve with the video, and Dave Green and Conrad. We thank you all. Mr. Regal, this has been another great episode. All good things for the BCC, and we'll see you next time on Gentleman Villain with Mr. William Regal.
Thank you.